Welcome to Tough Lies, the Golfers Podcast with Colin and Richard Zokol.
For golfers, this is the happiest time of year. I mean, I'm sorry. It's Masters Week. I'm wearing a green shirt, for God's sakes. Welcome, everybody, to Tough Lies, the Golfers Podcast. So great to see you. Richard Zokol, my friend in golfing crime. It's Masters Week. Can we be more excited?
Well, I think the whole world gets excited. And if you're not excited about the Masters coming up, you're not a golf fan. So it's spring's rite of passage in a lot of people's eyes, and a lot of North America's coming out of the cold weather, particularly if you're on the west side of the continent. And Masters Week. If the azaleas aren't blossoming, they sprinkle chemicals on them so they do blossom. That's how much the Masters has control. So we're excited about this week, but before we do, we need to chat about what happened yesterday on the PGA Tour.
We sure do. So, and we're going to dive into that. Of course, I'm going to suggest that everyone out there follows us, likes us, subscribes to us. Our website, toughliespodcast.transistor.fm, Instagram at toughliespodcast. On Twitter or X or whatever the heck you want to call it is at Tough Lies Pod. Give us a follow, like us. This is the week to do it. We've pulled out all the stops, I have to say, in terms of what we're going to bring this week. So later this episode, we have Lorne Rubenstein. I didn't say, we pre-recorded the interview, and I didn't say this to him, but for me, he's like Gandalf from Lord of the Rings. Like, he's like the wise one, right, in golf. And so, wonderful questions, wonderful interview with him. That's coming up soon. And later this week, the only Canadian male to win the Masters, Mike Weir, took time to join us. Last week, we cut that interview, but it's coming up as a special episode on Wednesday this week. And we can't wait to share that really insightful, wonderful interview with Mike as well. So make sure you follow, like, subscribe. As I've mentioned before, I'm going to mention it several times because this is just such a great week, and we want to have everybody enjoy what we have to come in this episode and the one coming up. So with that, we can't get into this week without unpacking a little bit what happened last week and maybe what from it might portend in terms of what we'll see at the Masters. I have a few thoughts on that. But first of all, the Valero Texas Open, a hodgepodge of golf in terms of stoppages, lift, clean place, all those sorts of things. But in the end, A.J. Spaun pulls it out, plays some wonderful golf on the final day, wins at 17 under, sort of from a bit further back in the pack. If I have it right, 7 shots back with 9 to play, pulls it out, and a very interesting presser. So your thoughts on what we saw from A.J. Spaun and the broader Valero Texas Open last week?
Yeah, the Valero Texas Open that played on the PGA Tour this past weekend, we kind of bore witness of a Tier 2 PGA Tour event. What was noticeable with the big names, those players are either taking a week off to prepare for the Masters, and so we get a lot of lesser known names, but also at the same time we got some good names. J.J. Spaun won the U.S. Open last year, and that's an interesting story. Oberg, who's trying to get his first PGA Tour win, that's a fascinating story in itself. But going into the back nine yesterday and in San Antonio, 5 guys tied at minus 14, fighting it out. And, unfortunately for Oberg, he made had 3 shot lost events on the front 9, and it took him right out of the tournament. So he's grabbed a bag full of quarters, and he's putting quarters in the ass-kicking machine for not pulling this thing off once again. Now, staying on this subject, there are expectations. I love how this guy handles his non-performance. So when you look at, of all the guys that were in contention going into the back nine, the guy who shot the lowest score was in the final round, won the tournament, J.J. Spaun, and did it in a fantastic manner. An Oberg who shot 70, that's just not going to get it done. And so And again, we're repeating the same story of a couple of weeks ago where he made some mistakes in the final round, and he's going to learn. I love the way he handles it. He doesn't lose his mind. Robert McIntyre loses his mind, and he's working on that. That's pretty interesting in itself. But the way in which J.J. Spaun won, he birdied 16, and then on 17, the drivable par 4, he hits it to 9 feet, makes the putt, separates himself, and then the situation changes. The wind came up on the 18th hole, blowing in the player's face, and I think the adjusted length of the hole was as high as 721 yards, this beast of with this creek that serpentines through it. So it was a very difficult par 5, and a lot of players were able to get that, they put the pressure on, but they weren't able to force the playoff. J.J. Spaun wins his third PGA Tour event, and he goes into the Masters a happy camper.
Yeah. And I would say for the very, 700 some plus yards final hole, it is difficult enough, but it's even more difficult when you have to play it from the maintenance shed, like McIntyre did on that last shot. That was a serious hooded for everyone. I was like, all of us hit those sorts of shots, it's one of the benefits sometimes at times in professional golf is you get those sort of line of sight relief opportunities where you can drop it and you get to clean it, and he had a clear line of sight from a reasonable position to give himself a chance, but it's still a very difficult hole. I would say that it was a textbook definition of sort of the different way to handle, the closing stretch.
Well, in particularly that second shot on 18, he's got a 3-wood in there. He's an aggressive player. He's a good player.
Yeah. Sure.
He's a real good player. He's got a sense of competitiveness that's very, very sharp, and he's very hungry. Unfortunately, it's still offset a little bit with frustration and anger is in there, and I think it keeps him just enough to be offside. That second shot on the 18th hole, he's trying to hit 3-wood up there and hitting a cut. He snap hooked the heck out of this thing and got into the mud and the junk, and then wasn't able. He had to drop the ball in the mud to hit his third shot, which it's a lot to ask for in that situation. And he goes away frustrated again. But he's constantly working on. He's talking about how he has to improve his mental perspective and deal with his frustration. So, but one thing they will have is some challenging issues at the Masters. We hope this week coming up is Masters worthy and weather wise and how it affects the golf course. But we can't wait to watch, can we?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I kind of feel like it would be in the look ahead at the Masters this week. If I was going to say what stories am I rooting for, one of the stories I would love to sort of see unfold would be Oberg actually getting it done. He's dealt with the stress and the failure of these past couple of weeks, and at the most important time where his game's clearly at a high level, very high level currently, he sort of learns and applies what he's learned in closing it out on the biggest stage. I think that would be a really wonderful story.
Funny you say that, because that could be the exact carbon copy of Nick Faldo when he won his first match. Because prior to that, he wasn't getting the job done either in major championships.
And people forget that.
Well, they don't remember it all. Some can't even remember that early. And he was labeled El Foldo for choking.
That's right.
And then I remember he then won the Masters, and the week after is always at Hilton Head, RBC Hilton Head, and Harbour Town. And I remember in the press room, and the British press were really harder. They were way harder on Faldo than the American press. And they were giving him the gears and El Foldo. And I remember the story, and I don't know if it's a true story or not, but it was one that circulated the locker rooms when he was getting calls from the media from England. And there were 3 calls waiting for him. And he went into the press room. He picked up the one. He said, F you, hung up. Picked up the phone. And the second one said, F you. He hung up. And the third one, he picked it up. He says, F you, and hung up. and that's how he dealt with the UK media. So there's that story that just came to my mind. But you're right. It could be a replica of the Faldo story. If Oberg, and I think he's a and I'm going to reinstate that he's got a sharp mind. I think he's got the perspective, the proper perspective from learning this, but he has to learn it, and it's his baptism of fire breaking through to winning a major championships. Good point.
Yeah, so that is a story I'm rooting for. The other thing that came to mind that I wanted to pick your brain on as I was watching this week and looking ahead, watching last week, looking ahead to this week, was, some players choose to play the week before. Some don't. And you've played in majors, and I was wondering, your approach, or what are the sort of overarching theories or approaches that you sort of buy into when it comes to preparing for a major? Are you better to take a week off because it's so mentally grueling, or are you better to try to have your game in shape where it's sort of, you can play with momentum? How do you view that? And in your career, were you experimenting with one versus the other? What did you find?
You try and figure it out, and everyone is different. When I went out to PGA Tour events, I found it was very important to be ready. So I would, playing in a tournament would sharpen my edge more than having not played the week before. So I would I would always play the week before, and maybe take some time off before it to rest up a bit and make sure I had fuel in the tank, because you don't want to, burn yourself out. And so my goal, like when I won the Greater Milwaukee Open, it was the week before the Canadian Open. I was treating the Canadian Open like a major for being Canadian, and I wanted to go to Milwaukee and peak. And I was trying to peak at that time, Milwaukee and the Canadian Open. It just so happened I won the week before and won that, and then that just evaporated all the fuel in my tank. But I was one of those guys where I had to play my way into sharpness. I couldn't take a week off and be sharp. I had to play my way into sharpness. But other people, Tiger was really the first one who really kind of always took time off. It didn't make sense to me, but everyone has to go figure that out on their own. Yeah.
Interesting. So just to recap on a couple of other aspects on the tour, we had Jeremy Gandon wins at -22 on the Corn Ferry Tour. Birdies the final 3 holes to win. Very impressive. Anytime you birdie the last 3 holes to win a golf tournament, I mean, you got to give credit. So congrats to him. And we had some good Canadian finishes. Again, we had A.J. Ewart, $60,000, sort of middle of the pack, made another cut, Valero. And our favorite player of the moment, Sudarshan Yellamaraju, tied 14th, $160,000. I mean, the guy is just on a roll. The YouTube, everybody's going to be like, you know what? I need to just abandon golf lessons. I'm just going to watch YouTube, I guess, because this guy's killing it.
I was starting to thinking about Sudarshan and A.J. and kind of their youthful naivety, so to speak, on the PGA Tour. And we've seen patterns like this. Like I remember when Bobby Clampett got onto the tour as an amateur, and he'd go out and lead the U.S. Open as an amateur, I would say, well, how did you do that? He said, well, isn't that what you're supposed to do, is try and lead the tournament? And then, and we watched guys who came on early and had early success. Jordan Spieth, Colin Morikawa, and then things change. But what's happening, I believe, to a significant degree, and now we have a couple of Canadians in that boat. We've never had them before that jumped in and just out of night. Perhaps they're good players. They're supposed to be doing what they're doing, but they don't have a family yet. They don't have businesses and so forth, and other expectations after they've been on tour for a number of years, and they're expected to do this. So I think to some degree there's this naivety. And that's what you're supposed to do, which is just the passage of every young player on the PGA Tour. And they should need to make hay while they can, and it's great to watch. But I think there's that aspect of it as well, that, and there's no reason why they should stop through the end of this year and stack up a bank full of cash.
Yeah, I agree. Also, I should note, Lorne Coughlin wins by 5 at Shadow Creek in Las Vegas. And what had to be, I watched some of that. It's just a weird environment in that there's basically nobody on the golf course other than the players. Shadow Creek is this very exclusive club in Las Vegas. I also thought it was interesting that the best the LPGA plays the best course in Las Vegas on an annual basis as part of the tour. Shadow Creek's a really, really spectacular golf course, tough as nails, as you can tell by the scores. And she won by 5, sort of going away. Very, very impressive. Also, I couldn't resist. I think we have to sort of, if I had the opportunity to go back in time, I did want to mention too, a week ago, Alex Fitzpatrick won on the DP World Tour. Alex Fitzpatrick, brother of Matthew Fitzpatrick, who won the week before at the Valspar. So back-to-back weeks, 2 brothers win on 2 different tours. I just, again, as the guy who likes stories, to me, that was just something I feel badly we missed bringing up last week, but couldn't help but resist. And maybe there was some inspiration in watching his brother win again.
Absolutely.
That sort of gave him the confidence to close out the way he did.
Well, exactly. And I think, using that, if he can do it, I can do it analogy, that's going to play a role. And particularly with the sibling rivalry, Matthew Fitzpatrick watching his brother win at the highest level and winning major championships. And he's, they've wrestled around and as kids together and wrestled on the golf course together. And there are moments when Matthew's dominated his brother. And that's just normal. So that's exactly what's going on to a significant degree. And pretty fascinating stuff to brothers that win major championships and majors and significant professional events as well. So I think he's going to, now that he's got a bit of momentum, he's going to close that gap with his brother a little bit as well.
Which would be fabulous. So we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back with the one and only Lorne Rubenstein for a wonderful interview. And talk about his views on the Masters, about Mike Weir and the Masters. We're going to talk about the status of Canadian golf on the professional tours. We're going to get his high-level view on the game. Very much looking forward to that. I do want to just re-mention, so we have this episode coming out on Tuesday. Tomorrow, on Wednesday, Mike Weir is going to join us. So make sure you listen, subscribe, follow, like, at Tough Lies Pod. And website, toughliespodcast.transistor.fm. And make sure you hang in there. We'll be right back with the one and only Lorne Rubenstein. This episode of Tough Lies is brought to you by TrueSpec AI Yardage Intelligence. Most golfers use GPS. Smart golfers use data. TrueSpec pairs high-resolution course mapping with AI-powered shot strategy. Through a mobile app that knows exactly where you are on the course, current wind conditions, elevation change, and most importantly, your shot tendencies. It doesn't just tell you the number, it recommends the club, the target, even the smart miss. All you have to do is execute. TrueSpec, AI Yardage Intelligence, because strategy should be automatic, pressure is not. Well, welcome back to Tough Lies, the Golfers Podcast. It's Masters Week. I don't know if there's a week of the year for golfers that gets as much excitement, enthusiasm for what's to come in the golfing year as this week, and we're super excited to have, for me, the quintessential golf writer in Canadian history, Lorne Rubenstein. I'm just going to I could go on forever, but I'm going to give a quick highlight to our listeners. Lawrence background, one of the most respected voices in golf journalism, former longtime golf columnist for the Globe and Mail for, it appears, 33 years by my note. Amazing. Author of 16 books on the game, including the book Mike Weir, Road to the Masters. Inducted into both the Canadian Golf Hall of Fame, the Ontario Golf Hall of Fame, and multiple Lifetime Achievement Awards in golf journalism, including the PGA of America Lifetime Award in golf journalism. Please welcome our guest, Lorne Rubenstein. How are you, Rube?
I'm good. It's great to talk to you guys from across the country. I'm in Florida. You're in British Columbia, Zoke, and where are you, Colin?
I'm in British Columbia as well, yeah. I moved out to Predator Ridge not that long ago and and Zoke immediately left thereafter. So
I retired.
So it wasn't. So I took it personally, but I guess maybe I shouldn't have. But it's really great to see you, and there's so many things that would love to talk about. But I think because it is Masters Week, I think let's start there. And I'm curious. We're looking ahead to another edition of the Masters this week. We could go anywhere, but I think maybe we should start with your fondest reflections of Masters past, and then maybe what you've seen of late. And then I think there's some other interesting ideas that we can get into as well.
Well, the first major I went to really as a writer was the British Open in 1982 that Watson won. But the next one was Augusta the following year. And of course, any writer, anybody would look forward to going to Masters. And as a long-time, reader about Masters lore and stories, and getting to know Herbert Warren Wind, the great writer for the New Yorker, about the Masters for so many years, I had a number of things I wanted to do that first year, and one of which was getting to know Herb, which I did, spent time with him, walking the golf course early in the morning, 18 holes, going through the historical materials in the clubhouse, and just getting to know the golf course, going out to the range. Back then, the press was in what they called a Quonset hut. It was more like a metallic tent than anything else.
Military don't, yeah.
A few people had typewriters. I had an basically 8-line Radio Shack Model 100 computer. And we all sat there. And I remember one day I walked out of there and I saw a notebook lying on the ground. And I picked it up. I didn't know whose it was. Turned out it was Herbert Warren Wind's notebook. He had dropped it. So I sought him out, and he was so grateful. You would have thought he had won the match. Never mind, right? And great. We became friends, and more than acquaintances, less than close friends over the years after that. And that was certainly a highlight. But other highlights included watching, I think it was Gene Sarazen, Byron Nelson, and Sam Snead. They were the honorary starters. And in those days, they didn't only hit a drive on the first hole, that kind of wimpy thing they do now. They played 9 holes.
He played the front 9.
The 9 with Herb Wind, and we watched those guys play, which was fantastic. And then on Tuesday night, with Champions Dinner, I was up at the top of the clubhouse. They really treat the media beautifully at Augusta National. So many advantages to being a member of the media there. And one thing is you can get right in the clubhouse where everybody is. You can even go in the locker room, not in the Champions locker room, but in the locker room itself. And up top there, overlooking the golf course on the veranda, I happened to encounter Gene Sarazen, who was all dressed in a suit, ready to go into the Champions Dinner. And we talked, looking out at the golf course, and he recounted that 4-wood that he had holed way back when for a 2 on the par 5 15th that got him into a playoff with Craig Wood. So it was just full of memories like that. And I made sure to take advantage of every possibility at Augusta that week. And I continued to do that for the many Masters I went to after that. It was in those days I didn't have a place in Florida, so it really was a rite of spring and the beginning of the golf season for me.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, Rube, I do want to say welcome to our Tough Lies, the Golfers podcast with Colin and I. It's delightful to have you on. You've been a good friend for many, many years, and my first recollection of meeting you was in the 1980 Canadian Amateur in Halifax, I think, in the first time, and I knew you had at that time caddied for Nelford in the British Amateur, and you played in the British Amateur, did you not?
I played in the British Amateur in '77 at Ganton in England, and that's where actually I knew that he had won the 2 previous amateurs, 75 and 76, and I saw him on the first tee, pulling his pull cart with his wife Margie, and she was pulling it along as well on some holes, and we played together a nice practice round, and I quickly saw why he was meant to be a tour player and I would be a writer. It was he hit a 1-iron. I remember you remember those days when
of course.
He hit a 1-iron into a par 5 about 30 feet from the hole, and he had that putter that looked like a hockey stick, a ping 0, big head.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So he went 5th round. I didn't. But we became good friends, and actually wrote a book together too about his first year on the PGA Tour, and we're still in touch.
Yep, yeah, and I do remember I'm kind of going, okay, well, I'm going to be turning pro in a couple of years, and getting to know you in 1981 as well, and I'm kind of going, okay, I'm going to try and play golf for a living, and you're going to try and write for golf for a living, and there's a lot of water that's under the bridge right now. So it's been delightful to be such a good friend of yours, Lorne, for so many years, and you and Nell, and it's exciting to see where you're at.
Well, in those days, golf writing was really in the ascendancy. You know, there were a lot of magazines around. The Globe and Mail was really interested in a general golf column when I approached them. We started Score Magazine in 1980 as well. And back then, you know, you could do that, make a living. I had a couple of lucky breaks on with the Globe and starting Score and
Right.
tour and getting to know people like you and Nelford and others out on tour. I'm not sure I could do that right now. I'd have to do all sorts of things in the online world, you know, podcasts like you guys are doing. But back then I could just write and make a living, and that lasted a long time. Eventually, of course, I had to adjust to the online world, and I did that, but not to the extent that younger writers have to do these days. So I was very fortunate to come along at a time when writing really, really did matter.
Yeah. It's easy to say how much we miss those days of quality writing about golf. That's for sure. One of the questions I had, you know, I was thinking about, you know, this interview coming up yesterday, and you know, I've never had the good fortune of being at Augusta. I do understand from others that it's a lot, you know, there's sort of differences from what you see on TV versus what you experience when you're there. Obviously, it's hillier, I think, as the terrain than what we might sort of recognize on television. But I was wondering if there are any other sort of idiosyncrasies to the course, to the experience there live versus what we see on TV. Like, what are some of the things that stick out when you're there? You're like, oh man, I didn't know about that until I was here.
Well, one of the things that struck me when I went there in my first walk around the course and watching practice rounds, and it still exists really, is the importance of the short. I mean, nowadays, especially when players are hitting the ball so long, they're coming in with shorter irons. Back then, you really had to be very, very precise. Like on the first hole, you know, you might be hitting a 6 or 7 iron in, or some of the shorter hitters, maybe even a 5 iron. Now they're mostly hitting 8 irons, 9 irons, wedges, so they can get the ball to some of those tight pin placements at Augusta. But even there, you had to be so careful in the way that you were thinking your way around the golf course. You really got to know where to hit it, where to miss it, and if you short-sighted yourself, I remember for the first 20 years I went, if you short-sighted yourself, you were in trouble. You might be closer to the hole than you would be if you had, you know, put it on the green. But short-sighting yourself when they didn't have lob wedges, when you had to sort of chip it into a hill to kill the speed, you had to be so imaginative. It's not as required right now with the short game because of lob wedges and people being able to throw the ball up in the air. But I remember, for example, in 2003 when Mike won the Masters, and I was writing a book about him, and I followed him pretty much every hole all week. And one of the rounds, I think it might have even been the first round, the stats would show that he hit maybe 10 or 11 greens. Well, there were times where he intentionally missed the green because he'd rather be 40 feet away, maybe on the fringe, than close to the hole and have a 10-foot downhill putt. So stats can be misleading then because strategy is so important. That's still the case, but not as much. Augusta's done things to try to combat how far the ball is going, including, of course, lengthening the course, putting pins tighter to the edges of the greens.
During that time, what do you recall the speed of the greens being? They're a lot faster today, and they're limited to the slope that they can't get them much faster as well. But was the stimp meter reading, were they 11 or under at that time, or do you have any recollection of how
it were 10 to 11? And even now Augusta will adjust them if they have no rain and it's really hard and fast. They'll be careful. They are very, very careful where to put the pins, that sort of a thing. They don't want to have 4 degrees of slope around the hole or anything like that. I remember watching Ernie Els a few years ago on the first hole. You might remember I was right there, and he 6-putted the first. And you hear there's all kinds of stories about players.
I do remember that.
Yeah, if they get on the wrong side of the hole. But the greens, wouldn't have been as fast then, and because they just weren't players.
Right.
Nowadays, though, that's one way to. I remember Peter Thompson, though, telling me, 5-time Open champion, in that the way to challenge players is to make greens slower, not faster, because then they actually have to make a stroke at it. You'll see the next 3 days or until the first round of the Masters this week. They'll be practicing their putting for the speed as much as for the slope, the speed. And I think that still does matter. It's fun to watch them putt because putting is so important there.
Sure, and also, it's so weather dependent immediately. If the rain comes down, softens them up. Sure, they can. If they have too much rain, they got the sub-air systems to suck the water out and make them firm them up, as fast as possible. But it's always fascinating to watch to see what they do with the conditions and what Mother Nature does to the softness of the greens as well. Rube, I got another question for you.
Go ahead.
With the situation that you're down in Jupiter right now, and the Masters were coming up to it, they're going to have the dinner on tomorrow night, and with this situation with Tiger that's involved with, what are your thoughts over the years and the situation that Tiger is in right now? It's very sad, but I haven't asked you that question on your on your take on the Tiger situation in the moment.
Yeah, it's sad. I mean, whether he's addicted to prescription medication or not, it seems he could be. You feel for the guy because of that. But at the same time, he's the architect of his own life. So, I have two minds about it. I'm very sad for what's happened to him. At the same time, I guess he's generated some of these issues over the years. But as far as his golf goes, I mean, I was there in '97 when he won by 12 shots and been there over the years and did a book with him about that '97 Masters. So I feel, really it's been a privilege or a lot of fun just to watch a great player like that really, hit the shots he's had to hit at critical times over the years. I hope he gets his life together. He's in Switzerland now, and I hope he'll work it out. I hope the people who care for him, and there are people who care for him, and he will listen to them. But who knows? It's all the big question right now as to where it all goes. The other thing I would hope is that the media doesn't only focus on Tiger this week. On his. That they're going to ask pretty much every player, what's it like? What was it like at the Champions Dinner without Tiger? And, they're going to give standard answers, really. It was too bad he wasn't there and da-da-da-da-da. But let's focus on the tournament.
What about Faldo's take on it, who he has openly said that there should be some consequences with his relationship with the PGA Tour? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Faldo's always been one to speak his mind, and, he was probably a little bit harsh in the way it came out, I would say. At the same time, there is a question to be asked, I suppose. Tiger has taken a very, very prominent role with the PGA Tour now, with the PGA Tour wanting that, I mean, is he going to be able to fulfill his responsibilities? We'll see. I don't know. So I thought Faldo was a little bit harsh, but at the same time, he may not be the only one who feels that way. He's just the one who said it.
I wanted to ask as well. I wanted to pivot from Tiger. I agree with you. I think one of the things that's I'm going to find frustrating about this week is sort of the never-ending discussion about Tiger and his absence. But I think we also, as Canadians, have a lot to look forward to in professional golf. One of the things that Zoke and I have been talking about nonstop this year, sort of the emergence of a couple of new Canadians, but also, that things have really never been better from a professional standpoint in a lot of respects at the top levels, with 15, 17 players on the PGA Tour between Korn Ferry and the PGA Tour itself, hailing from Canada. And what I wanted to ask you about that was, we have a pipeline of great talent coming. You wrote the book about Mike Weir and his ascendancy, winning the Masters. I'm curious if you had any thoughts on what if anything there might be in terms of differences in terms of Mike and his achievements in professional golf, or maybe who you see ascending from the collection of players that might just have the same level of career that Mike has had.
Well, you guys call your podcast Tough Lies, and Mike was very, very tough. You can go down the range at any tournament. Every one of those players hits the ball great. But then, as Johnny Miller once said, the longest walk in golf is from the practice tee to the first tee. Some players handle it better, and then the longest walk is from the 71st tee to the 71st green to the 72nd green when you've got a lead in a major. And Mike handled that very well. His caddy, Brennan Little, said to him, Mike, if they had told us we were going to come to the 72nd hole here at Augusta with a chance to get into a playoff with a par or to win it with a birdie, would you have taken that? Of course. And he relishes that, and he always did. I guarantee you he's there this week, and his goal is not just to make up the numbers, but to make the cut and have a decent finish. He goes that's just the way he is. And there's always been a toughness about Mike Weir. I'm sure Zoe could attest to that. Just something about him mentally. His
mental
mind,
toughness.
Put it that way, it runs really, really strong. I mean, he won that Masters with hitting a lot of wedges in a par fives, not going for the greens and chips. And he showed a lot of discipline. So whether there are any young players who have that kind of discipline, there are a lot of them who have the physical talent. And there are some surprises, like this young man, Sudarshan Yellamaraju, what he's doing. He racked up another top finish, a good finish this past weekend in San Antonio. And he's really doing something, and he just has done it his own way. YouTube and out teachers. It's very interesting that path is still available to players. But then besides him, you've got Corey Connors has played well in the Masters. You're right. Every week we now expect to see a Canadian up there on the weekend. It's not a surprise. When Zoke played, a few great players like Hugh Zoke and Dan Halderson and Nelford for a time before his injury, Dave Barr. But there weren't 7 or 8 every week that we thought had a chance to win. That it wouldn't be a surprise. It would not be a surprise at all if Corey or some of the other guys this week, a couple of the others who are playing, were right there on Sunday. They've got that much confidence.
Yeah. I find it. I like the notion. I should mention we are talking to you today. We did actually do a recorded interview with Mike Weir, which we're going to air on Wednesday this week, sort of get people hyped up. And one of the things looking back on his time playing the Masters, which I thought was really interesting when I did, was how it was a rain out the first day, and how that sort of toughness that you speak of within Mike may have been in some ways a tactical advantage for him. A lot of people don't necessarily deal with the obstructions within the game, in a tournament. Like he was capable of. And, he was just sort of guy that struck me as like the harder the conditions got, the more he sort of, his resiliency and his resolve sort of kicked in.
Yeah, he's always been a very agile player mentally, and he could adjust. He could do what he needed to do. If he couldn't, hit a par 5, as we were saying, then he would lay up to the right yardage, hit that. He always had a lot of confidence in his short game and putting. And I remember in the Masters media room one time, they asked him about, so you're the first left-handed golfer to win a Masters. He sort of chuckled because he knew everybody expected that would be Mickelson. He went on to 3 Masters, but it was really Mike who did that. And, as you say, he almost relished the tougher conditions, really. And he's just going to use it as a challenge. And that's one of the reasons I really enjoyed watching him, really, right from including on the Canadian Tour. I could recite some things he did on the Canadian Tour, which just showed how strong a mind he had. And any average golfer could learn a lot from watching him play the way he played, because he didn't overpower golf courses. He overthought golf, not overthought.
He is the classic term of it's not the size of the dog in the fight, but the size of the fight in the dog. That's what Mike Weir is. His belief system. He was taught at BYU, Carl Tucker, to if the situations get more difficult, then you have a stronger advantage. And he believed that, and he built his belief system. So when in 2003, when the weather got bad, it got wet and cool, the big hitters were their advantage was somewhat taken away, and it fell into Mike's. Even like Zach Johnson, Mike is the same type of player as Zach Johnson, who wedged himself, who was able to use his wedge to his strength, hit them consistently through the week, and make a lot of putts. And it's just his sheer determination is just something that needs to be focused on and always appreciated.
Yeah, he gives all of us golfers hope, because you can make good with what you have. Whatever you have, you can be a better player just with your mind as opposed to your golf.
That's right. Building the belief system, and the fact that he has, that today's, group of players on the Canadians on the PGA Tour, and the new ones coming up, can very easily, believe that if Mike can do it, then I can too. That type of mentality, which is very key in a nation or a community that's trying to build this objective to put as many tour players on the LPGA Tour and the PGA Tour.
I mean, anybody should watch Mike this week, because one of the great things about the Masters app is you can see every player's every shot. So if you want to focus on him, you watch him miss a 6-foot putt somewhere along the line, and he will, you'll think it's 2003 again with his reaction. You'll look at his face. I missed that. It's a 6-foot putt. I may not drive the ball 290, 300, but I can make a 6-foot putt. What's the matter with me? Really, he'll just be instantly transported back in time to when he won that match. Yeah. He was doing all these good.
So, Ruben, the remaining time we have left, I feel like, with your history and longevity in the game, I can't help but want to ask you some higher level sort of questions, around golf in general. So I guess my first question, are you happy with where golf is in terms of the professional game, in terms of, do you think it's headed in the right direction? Are there, I'm just very interested to get your sort of point of view on the game sort of writ large.
It's very easy for somebody of my age to come across as and experienced in the game to come across as like an old fogey and think, I wish it was like this. But it's still a fantastic game. I remember Frank Hannigan, the former executive director of the USGA. I was at the Senior British Open watching a scoreboard with him once there in Wales, and he said, you know what, the PGA Tour could disappear tomorrow, and golf would still be a great game. Golf is mostly a participant sport, and we can't forget that. People play it. There isn't another sport where people play it to the degree they do at advanced age. So that's number one. Golf will always be a wonderful game. As far as the PGA Tour goes, obviously, I wish the whole debacle with LIV hadn't happened. I wish, some of the players were at the Masters this week who deserve to be there. I wish gambling weren't such a big part of the game right now, because I think that's really, really dangerous. I saw a program on CNN on Monday night about gambling in basketball and bribery and what's going on in the NIL aspects of it, name, image, likeness. So money has become so dominant, and the new PGA Tour people now, they want to, bring more and more money. That's just the way we are. So I wish that weren't the case, and I wish, of course, obviously, that the golf ball weren't going as far. I don't want to negate players' physical ability, but I don't see how anybody can argue that it's the equipment more than anything. I mean, you're going to tell me Jack Nicklaus, he wasn't the best physical specimen, and there were a lot of people like that. Lloyd, they had unique swings, and so those things we could go back a little bit, but that's not going to happen. So we have to enjoy the game for what it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we love your rationale, Rube. You've always been had such a good, strong baseline standard with the game, and that's. Tell me which, out of the books that you have written or co-wrote with your guests, you've been with Tiger, Ledbetter, Knudsen. What's your favorite?
Well, the book I did with George Newson was, very, very important to me, because it was in the last year of his life. Became very, very close friends, and I'm glad that book is still out there and helping people, and it's had a nice run. It's more a book about almost philosophy of the game than it is about the golf swing, for sure. But also the other book, I've had the opportunity to do so many different books. The one about Mo Norman after his death, that's very important to me, because I knew Mo since I was a kid. Summer that Nell and I spent in Dornoch in Scotland, and I wrote a book about that. Has also been a nice book for readers. It caught on. They just published 25th anniversary edition a couple of years ago. So I've been really lucky to have the opportunity to write all kinds of different books on my own with players and about the architecture. So it's been a good career. It's not quite done yet, but it's deep into the back nine.
It is, and I need to thank you very much for contributing to my book that's coming out on May 19th for writing the foreword. I can't thank you enough. Your words are very gracious.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that coming out, and I know readers are really going to enjoy it.
Yeah, I too am looking forward. I'm only hearing some of the stories on our show, and I'm like, it's going to be an all-timer coming out, I'm sure. Now, I just wanted to say on my behalf, thank you so much for joining us, Lorne. It's really great to reconnect. It's been a long time. We had such wonderful interactions back in the day. I am surprised. Zoke and I had a bet whether Accuform would come up in the conversation before too long, but we didn't touch on that, which is fine. But yeah, we're super grateful to see you again, and so glad to hear your views on all of this. Yeah.
All righty. Thank you for inviting me on, and good luck. I'm glad you guys have started this podcast, and I look forward to listening to it for a long time.
And and we'll bring you back on many more occasions. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. It's great to hear your views.
Somehow.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
For sure. Great to see you, Lorne. Thanks for joining us once again.
You bet. Bye-bye.
And we're back. So nice to be with you. Tough Lies, the Golfers podcast. What a great discussion with Lorne. Every time I listen to him, it's talking to a golf history book, a living golf history book. I mean, he's been around for all the great majors, so many wonderful stories, so much wisdom in his perspective too, which I really appreciate. I love that he doesn't want to be the old stodgy character, sort of that we got to go back to yesteryear in this way. But also with some great insight as well. What were your thoughts on our discussion with Lorne?
Yeah, Lorne has been such a close friend of mine. He caddied for me one year at the Canadian Open. As a matter of fact, the day Mo passed away, it was the first round of the Canadian Open, and Lorne was caddying for me.
Yeah.
What I love so much about Lorne Rubenstein is he's a full disclosure guy, and when he does have biases, he discloses that I'm a friend of this or that or whatever, but he doesn't try and do anything he shouldn't be doing, and I love that. He's honest, he's trustworthy, he's loyal, and makes us feel good as Canadians when as
very frank, doesn't suffer fools. Just a lovely guy to listen to about the game. So I wanted to move. Every episode we do like to talk on the mental side of the game. So we have the mind track mental side of mental golf moment. Your thoughts from this past week? I think you wanted to bring up something with JJ.
Yeah, the mind track moment this week is JJ Spaun, and in his interview right after he won, we watched him and his caddy. His caddy was getting very excited, but before the final few holes were done, JJ wasn't having anything to do with that, and it was his caddy's birthday at the time, so the victory was fantastic. But in his interview, he said that after his big win last year at the US Open, he said, winning such a big event, meaning the 2025 US Open at Oakmont, he says, I put a lot of pressure on myself this year, lots of expectations, a complete opposite of the mantra of last year. Recently, I'm trying to get back to being freed up. So once again, that we are.
You must be listening to this podcast.
It seems that Mind Track every week on the PGA Tour, it's an infomercial on Mind Track.
Yeah.
And he's first of all, he didn't stumble into it, but last year he worked his butt off to learn how to be present, not get ahead of himself, and it paid off with a driver on the 17th hole at Oakmont, and which won him the tournament, and so when he gets back to this year. Our minds have a way of our egos have a way of creeping up on us, and we go back to being conditioned to result oriented, and that's where expectations are. So he caught himself in that situation, and then he said he did everything early in the week to in order to handle these difficult situations, and he got back to his mantra. Or it's a form of meditation, not medication, meditation.
Yeah.
And we witnessed that with Cam Young, and we witnessed that with Gary Woodland, and every week. So he's talking about that if you slide back, if you're not on top of this, like after he wins the U.S. Open, his world's going to change.
Sure.
And then you kind of stop doing what you got you there, and you slip back, which is the mental discipline that you're trying to avoid. But he caught himself doing it, and he went back to staying in in order to play well, he needs his freedom. In order to have the freedom, you need to detach emotionally from the result. And he had the base from last year of knowing how to do it, so he can slip back in it once the situation got tight. And so this, again, we're going to see this repeat this cycle over and over again.
Right.
And you need a mechanism in which to condition yourself back into the present moment. And Cam Young was, I think this was brilliant by his psychologist, Dr. Brent McCabe. How do you be in the present moment when you're walking in the fairways? Well, he looks at his feet. Now, I've never heard that before, but I think it's brilliant. And I give credit to Dr. Brett McCabe for that. So he is. And then breathing. Gary Woodland, you saw him consciously breathing in and breathing out. I remember, the whole 18 holes of when I was trying to win my first PGA Tour event and successfully broke through. I was in that uncomfortable situation. So the conscious mantra of breathing and having this mantra in your head keeps you in that present moment. And quite frankly, if you don't prepare for this, when you're in those situations, it won't come to you. You have to condition yourself before this. And then, so when you're in the moment, that's when you deal with it, and then you respond accordingly.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. I think full credit to him for catching it as soon as he did too, because I think a lot of people who win a tournament like that, it takes a while before you recognize that what the problem is in physical. It's the expectations you're putting on yourself.
Our egos want the extrinsic results, the money, the win, what it means to us, how it affects our personal identity, and catching that and going back to what got you there in the first place is the key to unlock that door.
Yeah. How did that not go in? I won the U.S. Open, for God's sake.
Well, I mean, like Jordan Spieth, he's still struggling with that.
Yeah.
If he doesn't, if that putt doesn't go in, he's complaining to the world. What the hell happened there? I got screwed. Can you believe that it didn't go in? Just these are all things that that the top players are doing in order to get them across the goal line.
So in the final minute or two here, it is Masters Week. I don't know if anybody heard that. It's Masters Week. Come on. So, another great, we got Mike Weir coming up next episode. So excited. What a great week. Your look ahead to this week, maybe give me a high level sort of, what are you looking for? Is there a great story that you're looking out for? Is there something you want to sort of get us ready for as this week's about to unfold?
Well, I think it's all subjective. I constantly get disappointed if Mother Nature comes in and sets rain to the golf course and the deluge. So I hope the weather is there, because that way they can get the golf course in the exact position they want. Treacherous, scary, and and one that needs to be surgically dealt with by the top players, that yields the best man to win. I think I'm going to jump on what you suggested. I think Oberg is a person that I think he's ready to kick the door off its hinges. So hopefully he can do that and repeat the same story as Nick Faldo.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go a little bit askew in terms of what and I'm gonna do a shout out, a virtual shout out to Brian Rolap from this week. Which is to say, I want to say two things. If you're going to condense the tour to 22 and you're going to work from the fan interest backwards, here's an idea. Copy paste what the Masters does in terms of their digital experience and apply it to every event. There is no better week when it comes to following the players you want to follow, seeing all the content you want, the scoreboard, the leaderboard. Like when you go to the Masters website, they have it in such a better form than the actual PGA Tour. It's laughable. So I would love to see, people pay more attention to that and saying, why don't we get this from a quality standpoint from all the other events? Like every time I go on PGAtour.com, I'm frustrated because I don't get to I don't get the digital experience that I think I should. The other thing I would say is I saw a trailer for the next season of Full Swing on Netflix, which I watched it, and for me, most golf content leaves me wanting. And then I look at what they're doing on Netflix with that show and the way they promote it and the stories that tell, and I just go, why are we not getting more of that when it comes to the week-to-week enjoyment of the tour? Like the way they deliver that content to me is so archaic and old in format and tenor, and so sort of milquetoast, when there's so many great, rich stories to be told that I caught those two things and I'm like, man, Wouldn't it be great if they are going to go to the trouble to reformat the PGA Tour? Let's look at some shining examples of the way it could be done, and hope to hell that they're paying attention and they pull it off.
Yeah. I did notice that Paramount and Prime are going to be on platforms already. Starting right now, this whole week of the Masters. So Masters, that'll be interesting. But I think you got a lot of good points in there, and I think Brian Rolapp and his team are still trying to figure things out from the top and climb down. And there's no question there is room for improvement on the digital side that will, the market will determine.
Yeah, well, I mean, if he comes from the NFL, there's almost nobody better at that sort of thing. So if he's learned anything in the NFL and he applies it here, I think we're going to be all the better for it. So hopefully that's what we see ultimately. So let's wrap up this episode and thank our wonderful guest.
Yes.
Lorne Rubenstein. Gandalf, as I like to say. But amazing interview. Great way to kick off the week. And obviously remind people, we have another episode coming out tomorrow with a wonderful interview with 2003 Masters champion Mike Weir, and it's going to be awesome. So please follow, subscribe, tell all your friends, and join us again on another episode of Tough Lies, the Golfers Podcast. Thanks again, Richard Zokol. It's been great.
Thanks for being with us, Colin. Thank you.
Join us next week on the Golfers Podcast with Richard Zokol and Colin McDougall.